I will be presenting my research project on the securitization of migration as it relates to the European migrant crisis of the 2010s. So first, I did research on the migration security nexus because I was intrigued by the widening of security studies and the process through which an issue like migration becomes securitized. And so this led me to my research question, which theoretical approach to securitization best explains the European migrant crisis of the 2010s? So just for some brief background, unrest in the Middle East and North Africa, most notably Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, in the early to mid 2010s led to a stark influx of migrants to Europe. And by the end of 2016, almost 5.2 million refugees and migrants had arrived in Europe. And then in terms of my theoretical background, so scholars referred to as wideners have increasingly challenged traditional realist ideas about security and its state-centered military-focused approach with new questions about what constitutes a security issue and how these issues such as migration come to be securitized. So two of the schools of thought that emerged as a result are the Copenhagen and Paris schools. So for the Copenhagen school, one of its biggest concepts is the securitization theory, or the Speech Act, which states that a security issue does not emerge because something constitutes an actual threat, but because a political actor or actors have defined it as such a threat. So for example, migration would emerge as a security threat because politicians often characterize it as a threat to national security and sovereignty. And then the Paris school, on the other hand, argues that security professionals such as customs, border police, intelligence services, and providers of surveillance technology are the key actors that manage and control existing established security threats and identify new ones to play on the unease of citizens. And this school also acknowledges the existence of the Speech Act. Like the Copenhagen School, will looks more specifically at the bureaucratic routines and the day-to-day practices of these security professionals involved in border management. So because only the Paris School acknowledges both the role of politicians and the important role of security professionals, I argue that the Paris School provides the most comprehensive analysis for the securitization of the European migrant crisis. Then also just to clarify, I'm not trying to argue that security professionals are the only causal factor in securitization, simply just that they do play a role in the securitization process. So my methods include investigating studies of security professionals, specifically Frontex, European Border and Coast Guard Agency, as it is one of the primary agencies in the handling of migration, as well as surveillance technologies that connect migration to security. So more specifically, I look at several operations conducted by Frontex and some of the technologies employed, such as automated decision-making, facial recognition, biometric data collection, and others over the course of the crisis. So through investigating the Paris School, I noted a shift in the role of Frontex over the course of the crisis. So one change being a greater emphasis on tackling traditional threats such as terrorism and combating cross-border crime, so drug smuggling, illegal fishing. And then another point to note is that Frontex also had greater cooperation in its operations with actors that have a heavier security focus, such as NATO and Europol. Then I also found that increased surveillance from newer updated technologies likely contributed to securitizing efforts by further enhancing the idea that migrants need to be watched and controlled. So in addition, one interesting caveat that I found through my research that the Paris School often fails to consider that securitization may not be a linear process. So Frontex, as well as these surveillance technologies, also have a role in contributing to humanitarian efforts, which may potentially be acting as a desecuritizing force. So in terms of implications of this research, greater structural change may need to occur to combat the day-to-day securitizing practices of Frontex, as well as these surveillance technologies in Europe. And finally, I found it important to contribute to research on this topic because increasing global mobility and the association of migrants with criminality and terrorism has indicated the need for a better understanding of how migration comes to be securitized, the implications of this process.